So this is chapter 1, the terrain of our brain, part 1, about trauma. Now this video is setting the frame for the work we do in the next videos. Remember, it's systematic, step by step. So again, give this session the time it deserves and really understand what the principles we're working with are. Wisdom is key to this work. We have to understand why we do what we do, and then use that wisdom as leverage. If you have the right time, the right place, the right point of leverage, and the correct lever, and the right effort, you can move mountains. Leverage comes from wisdom. Now, trauma is an assault. It's whereby the impact of the experience cannot be adequately processed. It cannot be adequately processed as experience, and it can't be processed and integrated as what happened. So trauma is anything that leads to a huge shift in our biology, that the experience, instead of being processed, is held in patterns in the body. That's somatic patterns of muscles and fascia and tension, emotional responsivity, emotional closure, as well as cognitive meaning making. We make up meanings and narratives, stories about ourselves and the world. And all these different patterns alter a person's psychosocial responses and substantially reduce quality of life. Our capacity to respond to life situations and our ability to socially engage, experience joy, experience pleasure even, to learn and empathize with other people all get compromised. Remember that what one person experiences as trauma, another person views as resilience or character building. That's okay, because trauma is not just about what happens to us, but what we do with what happens to us. If we have enough support and enough resources, then we can be fortunate enough so that we can work with that traumatic experience successfully and well. Many people don't have the resources. They don't have the support. They don't have that input. And trauma such as neglect in childhood or abuse in childhood, in our developmental phases, and also, in teenage times, adversely affects brain development. And this phases of life, childhood and teenage, then the person experiencing the trauma has relatively limited capacity to meaningfully process the events. They can't do it. It's not possible. Trauma that occurs prior to prefrontal cortical activation, around 24 to 27 years of age, can't be effectively processed. We can't do it at that time. So it has to be done later. Trauma that occurred before we could even talk, in pre-verbal phases when we're a little baby, is held somatically. It affects the whole function of the body. It affects how the glands work, how the muscles and fascia are bound into defensive patterns, and even how the brain is structured, and how we breathe. These holding patterns, these glandular patterns, the defensive armoring, the emotional patterns, the cognitive patterns, they affect the development and the trajectory of our life, and also invite diseases such as cardiometabolic disorders, cancer, and a whole range of inflammatory conditions. Trauma is a whole body-mind experience. And sadly, trauma is actually endemic in our culture. From transgenerational trauma, where the trauma of previous generations is passed on from parent to child, to developmental trauma when we're children as it's passed through that line, and through adult experiences where our boundaries were transcended without consent. Somebody did something to us. Now, Gabor Mate uses the word trauma to describe an inner injury, a lasting rupture or split within the self, where we shut off from our authentic self. It's a splitting away from this part of ourself, our tender feelings, our softness, our beauty. We have to protect ourselves. And it's that kind of split. And this kind of experience actually leaves quite a raw scar. And that raw scar can be triggered. It kind of takes on a life of its own. And it's manifest in acting out. We get triggered and we act out the unresolved emotions, creating drama, destroying relationships, and leading to some body-based, somatic and cognitive narratives of tragedy, blame, shame, unworthiness and unlovability. We end up believing we're not worthy, we're not lovable. This is kind of capital T trauma, big T trauma as Gabor calls it. Lowercase t, little t trauma is not as memorable, it's less memorable, but it's extremely prevalent. And it has a quality of dismissive, demeaning, verbally abusive bullying. And this can happen from parents, it can happen from teachers, it can happen from peers, significant people in our lives. And all of this leads to suboptimal views of who we are, suboptimal views of what our potential is, and suboptimal views of how to operate well in the world and how to be in the world. It's also the response to neglectful ignorance, where our needs as youngsters, our communications, our growing person was shut down and ignored. Human beings are relational. We grow in relationship. We are actually interbeing because we grow in the relational synapse of attention and nurture. Now, if we starve a plant of nutrients and water, it doesn't grow well. It doesn't yield crops. Yeah? Human brains grow best in an environment, a garden of appropriate contact and touch, appropriate challenge, appropriate listening, witnessing, communication, being witnessed, and in sharing in emotional resonance and in creativity. Now, both big T and small t traumas are simply a continuum. It's a kind of spectrum. And they're there to help us understand our experience, not to demean or define, oh, that's just little t trauma. That's not what it's about. It's about understanding that continuity of the way that we were affected in terms of how we live from our authentic self so that we can recover that, so that we can effectively navigate ourselves and the stresses in the world. Because otherwise it leads us to distrust ourselves. It affects our belief in ourselves. It affects our available resources, our states, our perception of both ourselves and others in relationship. And it affects our capacity for loving relationship. And we don't want that. We want to be free of this. We want a life of creative purpose. And this whole course is about you reaching your potential and actualizing that, isn't it? So, if as you go through this course you feel you need more support, then reach out to our team and we'll find you the support you need. We'll help you either directly or find you the support. Just remember, you are not alone in this work. We're all in it together. I've had to do my journey and we're in it together. So be courageous. Be courageous in reaching out. Be courageous in asking what you need. The psychotherapist Alice Miller, look her up. She did a beautiful exposition of looking at the difference between people who acted out their trauma through destruction into the world, and people she looked at were people like Stalin, Hitler. We might look at Vladimir Putin or a number of world leaders, in fact. And also the majority of serial killers. Now, that she looked at as opposed to those who directed their trauma through creativity, art, and building a life of purpose. And here, if we look here, we find many great artists like Salvador Dali, Pablo Picasso, Viktor Frankl, who came up with logotherapy. Look at that guy. Nelson Mandela, 22 years in captivity. Look at these people. So this course is about, not just about what trauma causes you, but about you uncovering your creative purpose and finding more of who you are. In this process, if you uncover triggers, remember, they are an opportunity to grow. They're pointing towards where there's more freedom available, where you can find even more resilience, access more creativity, get more on track and find purpose and ultimately liberation, emancipation from trauma. So, first of all, when you get triggered, if you come across a trigger, catch that trigger, notice that trigger. Notice yourself acting it out if you go that far with it. Remember, that's the place of opportunity. That's the place of learning. That's the place which points towards part of you that was shut down, where you switch off from your emotional self, your beautiful, creative self. And we want to recover this creativity. So part of the work of accessing this creativity and owning your life, becoming the author of your life, taking agency, is uncovering the triggers, resolving them, and integrating that transformation into your life. And that's what this course is about. You becoming awesome.